Thank you, Marco. Thanks for the nice introduction. Hi, everyone. I think I share my screen first before I start. Yeah, I hope you see my screen now. Can you confirm quickly that you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Good. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. As Marco already explained, I want to set a focus on latest, or not the latest two pieces. One is called A Natural History of Networks, a performance piece, and another one is Floating Codes, which is an installation, like a walkable neural network in a way, a performative system. As And I want to quickly run through like a few projects from the last years to give you an idea how I work and my methodologies and my interests. And like to sum it up, it's probably like the idea of complexity is interesting to me, to research complexity, how do we perceive complex systems, which is all kind of following up my research on computability, on cybernetics, and how to translate kind of complex systems into physical, tangible spaces, I would say. And I once prepared, like for my students, like this eclectic map of interests that follow me, or that I followed over the years, and it's really just a wild mixture. But it's kind of started like with the idea of kind of opening black boxes, looking into things that have been already settled as a product or as a fact, and to reinvestigate it, like what is computation, and to look into complex systems and artificial life, autopoietic systems, emergent systems, like which are systems, that have simple rules, and but in together kind of simple elements perform or create some behavior that can't be predicted or can't be foreseen by looking at the rules. And media archaeology is always also a big part of my practice, kind of to look into the history of technology and media, and kind of dig for really weird, successful ideas, that poetic ideas that kind of did not succeed in the economic competition. Whatever that is, that could be like a trinary Russian computers, or fluidic computers, and these kind of interesting moments in history. Yeah, another field is also the geology of media and so on. But I would like to start now with my fast forward through my practice. And for me, well, this was a project from 2005, still studying at the Academy for Media Arts in Cologne, and I got the chance to work with a German search engine, and I can do whatever I want to do with this data. And at that point, like 3D printers and CNC milling machines were just on the market, and or just not available, but the idea was out. And the idea for me was like, okay, take this online data from a search engine and translate it into a physical sculpture, a tangible sculpture that evolves like in real time in the exhibition space. So it translates internet data in real time into a physical kind of landscape that can be observed by the people who in the exhibition. Or here it was like running like for 2 weeks permanently in the art school, and people could just like look every day how things change and what people were looking up. So that is a really, for me, like the starting point of thinking, like going from the virtual into the physical space, translating between these two spaces. And I think this is something that emerged parallel at many places. I remember also like from the German perspective in Berlin, there was Joachim Sauter, who was also Artcom studio, also experimenting with physical manifestations of virtual data, or like the idea of a pixel, a physical pixel that represents some kind of data point. But that was kind of, for me, didn't go far enough. So the idea was, okay, how can I build like a full computational machine as an and bring the full process into space. And this was heavily inspired by the old weaving machines like the Jacquard looms that used, you can see it here in the back, punch cards that kind of feed into the machine, and there's the strings and fabrics going into the machine, and then at the very end you get kind of like or here the lines are going into the machine, and here's a punch card, and what you get is like a fabric at the end with woven patterns, and this is kind of like already combines all the components of a computer of the at least of the 20th century or 19th century. So it's kind of taking informal data material, and you have some kind of output. And this was kind of the starting point for that project. And another component or concept came from cellular automatons, or this idea of a computing space, rechnender Raum, like, which is from the German computer scientist Konrad Zuse, who came up like with a scientifically probably not correct idea of a digital physics where some kind of cellular automaton kind of computes the universe. And this project kind of was triggered by that, and the whole system is kind of implemented through lines, weights, levers that kind of builds some kind of static neural network that compute kind of that system. Further, I was looking, so all projects somehow deal with computation, material, alternative forms of computation, how to break up systems, how to create some kind of open-ended computational process that and also release computational systems from their boring work in the finance industry or whatever. So and this was a project where the aim was kind of to look into the geological dimension or the materials that are actually in contemporary computational systems. So from semiconducting elements like galena, pyrite, silicon, and others, to building on crystal circuits that drive the system, or silicon carbide here that is basically the component that you need to build like a primitive LED. So the idea was like, okay, I built some kind of I built a hybrid between these crude raw computation materials and ready-made circuits to create like a computational device that is kind of operating at the edge of delivering concrete data, or at a chaotic border to that. So kind of it's always kind of that at that fringe between being mathematically correct and chaotic. Okay, this was a short snippet, and for our project, I try to tease them only quickly. We can look on my webpage, and maybe if you find something particularly interesting, you can watch the full video. This was a project called Mirage. It's actually from 2014, and the project has kind of, for me, multiple dimensions. On one side, it's kind of a projection device that is based on the reversed on a flexible mirror. So what you see here is a mirror that can be deformed by a set of actors that just in minimal amounts deform the mirror, like around 1 millimeter. And there's a laser beam, like a line directed on it, that creates like this death-like, landscape-like movements. And this this mirror sheet is kind of deformed by data that is running through some very simple neural network or Helmholtz machine that basically based on data that it gets from a fluxgate magnetometer that you use to measure the geomagnetic field of the Earth. And this data is kind of fed into this algorithm. That algorithm kind of tries to predict how the signal will change and react, and kind of builds some kind of three-dimensional map of it that kind of deforms the mirror. And what you get in the end is kind of like some kind of weird trip through that hallucination of that of the planet Earth, basically. Yeah. Another project that also implements some kind of self-organizing emergent system built around like 196 motors that act independently, get fed by random signals, and through the interconnections of these elements, they kind of create the system, kind of perform some kind of emergent complex behavior. So, but it's not like driven by a fixed algorithm or a composition. So the movement and the changes is something that happens in the interplay of the single agents in the system. Another project that also deals with computation, which is inspired by the geomancy, like a deviation technique where kind of stones are casted on the table, and then depending on a very precise or defined rule set, further predictions or deviations of the future can be made. So it's kind of like a deviation system based on geological material, which had, for me, while reading it, like it had like this, it has kind of like a digital manner, digital aesthetics already in this Renaissance techniques. And the origin is in the Arabic world. And what I built is kind of like a memory that's based on stones. So like these little pebbles can be moved by a little sucking mechanisms around, and it can store like a 1 or a 0, a stone or no stone, and it's kind of computing some kind of simple Turing machine on that material. And for sure, this material is like really prone to error. So it's like it's kind of introducing a chance system through its physicality. Also, just a quick run through that, putting the pieces back together again, that is also inspired by concepts of how does order kind of emerge from chaotic or noisy systems. And in this case, it's very simple mechanism. There are 1,250 motors that turn a little stick, and when they kind of have contact with a neighbor, they change their turning direction. And depending how much energy is in the system will tend to build crystalline figures like you see on the left side, or other emergent behaviors. Okay, so that was a quick run through my previous project, and a natural history of networks. I would like to talk about it now, which turned out to be a performance, but which was not sure from the beginning. So it actually was intended to build an installation at that time. And the project started like all projects for me starts with experimentation. So it's so I have a way of working which somehow oscillates on one side between like a very clear conceptual approach, but also like getting lost for months or years sometimes in experiments, into looking into material and behavior. And this project started actually that I found out about this oscillators based on mercury, so-called mercury beating heart. And I found this like really fascinating, like how you could make a fluidic machines, actors that kind of do things that are organic or in between it, or artificial movements. And I try to look into these, how to recreate something in my studio. And everyone knows mercury is kind of very poisoning. It's not really healthy to work with it. And if you look into it, or you start searching for fluidic metal actuators, metal machines or something, and then you come across a lot of papers, scientific papers, and I dig deeper into it and try to recreate such a system. And this is, I don't know, like from 2018, so quite a long time ago, like more than 5 years ago. I did a workshop with my students about materials, new materials, to find new materials for our artistic practice. And so I built this really first prototype, which is not built on mercury or around mercury. So the material, the fluidic metal here is gallistan, which is like a alloy that you can find everywhere, which is made up of gallium, which is the main component, which is like a metal with a very low melting point. But the melting point, I think it's around 35 degree or 40 degree, but in combination with indium and tin, the melting, so it's fluid at normal room temperature, so at 15 degree, 20 degree. And now it's like in a solution of sodium hydroxide that prevents that it oxidizes, and then you feed in currents in the system, and you have kind of this dendritic fractal-like growth. And at that point I thought, like, fantastic, what should I do? Can I do with it? And I put it into my the drawer in the little box where I store my experiments in. And this is one component for the project, A Natural History of Networks. And this is something I put by side, like when I at a certain point. And another interest I had was the work of Gordon Pask. I think probably most of you heard about him once. He is this British cybernetician with a dandy-like appearance, quite eccentric and interesting, kind of known for building very early interactive installations, devices that translate music into light shows and stuff like that. So really, like in the 50s, He was part also of the cybernetic serendipity exhibition at the ICA in London in the 60s, 69, 68, not sure. He probably in terms of or his for what he's known within the cybernetic community. So he also introduced the term new cybernetics or second order cybernetics. So where, you put the experimenter into the experiment itself. You think about what kind of you as an experimenter, how you influence the system, to add the second order of observation into the system, together with Heinz von Förster. And I always liked his idea of the conversation theory. I think this is something that also most people would refer to. The idea how knowledge is kind of generated, or how knowledge is made through conversations and dialogues, and knowledge is not something that is there. Knowledge is something that develops through feedback process to communication with either machines or humans, and so on. And he built like very strange machinery kind of of learning machines at that time. And what I really found interesting, and that's also something that's already in many of my previous works, that he kind of replaced like the idea of control with conversation. So a system has to learn. Like we know that from neural networks today, like the power of neural networks is that we have to train them, and it's not that we can write it in an algorithm what it is, the information or the knowledge. We can't put it in algorithm, but we need a system, a neural network or an algorithm that we teach with information, and then kind of the network kind of represents information. And this is something that I find in particular really interesting, in general, not only in context of this project, A Natural History of Networks. And one particular thing that he built, which is, I think it's everyone knows about it, but not really many people know how it works, and there's not really much material. There's this music color, like this machine that translates music into a kind of a light show, and he developed that in the 50s and 60s, I think. And he didn't use like a regular logic or computational device. He used like his chemical computer, or sometimes also called organic computer, or organic electrochemical display. It's you see it here. This is basically some kind of grown network of metal particles or metal grains in a solution, electrochemical solution. And the idea is like to feed into the solution electronic currents that represent something like external stimuli, and then based on a training set, a specific kind of threads or connections kind of grow in that, you can see it here, in that solution. And these threads, connections kind of represent kind of external information. But they also, analog, measurable resistances within this electric system. So the idea is like you can grow a network that can represent a specific input data, and the system kind of reacts to specific input data with an electric current. So kind of like a very primitive kind of neural networks and chemical computer, organic computer. And for me, this thing was always like the radical counter draft to Alan Turing's idea of a general purpose computer, or like the Turing machine. So it's kind of like super vague. It's something that needs time, like it needs a history in order to establish, to build up, in contrast to this Turing machines, algorithmic, the strict discrete machines where a tape is moved, which is also a fantastic poetic machine. But I kind of was into that, and I have to say there were many people already kind of working or exploring gone past ideas like this as artistic projects. For instance, Roman Kirchner's Roots, where he kind of grows also like this iron structures within this system, and based on the into that tank, and based on the currents, it kind of produced like a soundtrack. Or there have been also many dedicated exhibitions to the work of Gordon Parks, where people kind of reenacted, rebuilt Gordon Parsons systems. But they all use a solution with iron powder, and I don't have the full list of ingredients, but you will find a lot about that if you're interested into this. And then, like you saw, the first experiment I did was in 2018, and then 2020. I think that was a pandemic kicking in. So I had nothing to do, and I remembered, oh, I did this. I worked with this Galistan, and then you start, okay, as an engineer, you start, I want to control that. So, and I started to build my own apparatus to move the thing. Can I move it like really discreetly? What can I do with it? Like, and this is, I think, the first more elaborated prototype I built. Maybe to look into what's happening here. And it's a very simple electrochemical system. So you have basically the plus pole or the anode in the metal itself, yeah, and outside you have the minus pole, the cathode, and if you apply a DC voltage, the material will expand in the direction of the minus pole, the droplet. And this is like a screenshot from one of the scientific papers I found. What's happening? So it is in this sodium hydroxide solution that kind of constantly eats up the oxidation from the material, and also creates an electric conducting connection between the two poles, and it reduces the surface tension of the material, and it somehow starts to move into the direction. So it's kind of, I don't know, remembering Terminator films, like where you have that thing that kind of the blob, the metal blob that becomes a human or the robot and so on. I'm not an expert on Terminator, but you all probably know that one. So I started, which kind of totally represents my artistic practice. So that you start with very simple experiments, and then you start to think, okay, what can I do with it? How can I control it, or can I measure something in the system? Can I make sense what the system does? And so you start up building more complex systems. And what I found out, like during like the first series of experiments, because the initial plan was to build like a huge tank in an exhibition space, like I don't know, 5 meters times 5 meters, and kind of grow kind of these large metal threads and networks somehow represent the environment of the space, that somehow kind of get their pulses from the environment and build some kind of representation of the outside, and kind of create a dialogue with either visitors or changes of the room, of the light. And this was the initial idea, but I found very quickly out that the system is also very dangerous, as it produces gases, chlor gases, oxygen, and so that it's nothing that can run in large scale independently. And you see here the burn marks, so it gets really hot at a certain point, and so I get the feeling, okay, it's nothing that will run independently without me. So in the end, for me, it turned out, okay, there's more dialogue between me and this kind of blobby, fluidic computational device. So what I also did, like, so sure, I measured the different currencies and the resistances in the system, and kind of build like a feedback loop in order to produce or to create stable images, or to grow or try to grow specific structures. And then, as it turned out, okay, this kind of becomes like a performative system. So then then I started like, okay, how to present it the best way, and so I built a light box under the thing in order to illuminate it from the back, and have another lighting system from the top, and kind of to build some kind of environment to perform the system in a way. I mean, also we already looked a little bit into the system, so it's now using 8 cathodes and 1 anode. It runs like this around 30 volts, and I skip a little bit through the internals. So I try to make it more like on one side it was it had like this, let's say, aesthetics of an scientific instrument, but it also was heavily inspired by modular synthesizers in a way. So it's kind of a modular system. And in order to play or to perform that device, I use a Max MSP interface where I can feed different signals on the different electrodes. I can apply different randomizing functions. I can sense and feedback specific parts of the system. So it's and change the lightning, and yeah. So this thing also has grown from a thing that is very easy and simple to like a complex modular system, kind of to interact with this fluidic metal part. And actually, like, the first iteration was planned to be in a smaller gallery space, and it was kind of, I was thinking, okay, I perform that in that space, and then we kind of leave the leftovers of the performed in the space and have a projection of the recording and so on. That was like the first thing. And then during the pandemic, this didn't work out, and we had some, because no one wanted to do things like this, and everyone wanted just the evening event. So we started like the smaller performative sessions that were on stages, and then one session in that was just before the war started, a performance in Moscow at Laboratoria, at Daria's place. Yeah, and maybe like I would show you a few images. So and the system has quite a wide range of characters, like what it kind of produces for an output, depending how what you kind of feed into the system. So it's either kind of like this very blobby, slow, moving, very organic shapes, or you can grow this dendritic fractal-like structures, depending on how you change the intensity of the fluidic. It will have an effect on how thin or thick the structures are. Or at a certain, if it goes over a certain energy level, system also changes the behavior. And while doing that, I was reminded of this Robert Flood, the drawings in his book about the two worlds. And I thought, yeah, it turned out to be like a performative microcosm, the piece, where I can kind of tell a story or grow kind of stories, perform stories of certain material stories, I would say. Yeah, it's like a cinema of matter. And maybe I close this with a. You have to tell me quickly if you have sound. You have to tell me quickly. Do you have sound of the video, or do I have to activate something here?
I think you have to activate the sound when you play back, when you share the screen. Jazer, I think that's the case, right?
Yes, when you share screen, you have to check off share sound as well.
Okay, then.
You may need to stop sharing and reshare.
Yeah. Okay. Found it. Does it work?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought I forgot to say something about sound. The sound is kind of not a decoration I formed around it. It's kind of the real time. It's based on the real time measurements of the resistances and currents in this fluidic, and that drives some real time synthesis. So it's kind of not representing or kind of mirroring kind of the fluctuations in the fluidic system. I think I'm now through.
That was exactly my question. I wanted to ask you about the sound. Yeah, go ahead. We will have time to talk.
I mean, I'm through now with floating codes and no, with natural history of networks. Do we have enough time to go into floating codes?
Absolutely. Yes, we have.
All right.
Of course.
Okay. And I don't know, for me, it's, I mean, this, because I spent more time on that work, so I talk a little bit more about the process, because the process is also, something that develops for me, and that kind of oscillates between like having experimenting, reading, and building prototypes, and have a conceptualizing things, but it's not like it's not a straightforward, it's kind of a very I don't know, ineffective process. And it's similar. It's also with this project, which it's floating codes, which I developed in parallel, basically to a natural history of networks, and it's a project also that you have seen that I was thinking and working on for a long time, thinking for a very long time. It's kind of a way of, because like the projects that I showed earlier, the ones that kind of perform complex dynamic emergent systems, they usually are like in a encapsulated space. So they are like they are their own microcosm, they're closed, and they're like in this framework, and that's where they act. And sometimes they get feeds of noise and random data from the outside, but in a way they are like a screen or like a microcosm. And for floating codes, the idea was kind of to expand this idea of organic, evolving, emergent system into a spatial experience. And the system, the project, this was the first iteration at Ars Electronica, like last year, and it's about 200 square meters, and it consists of around 250, I would call them artificial neurons. So they are little electronic circuit boards. They have a high power LED. They have a little microcontroller and a speaker. And on the back side, they have two photodiodes, and they're kind of, I don't know, it's very simple neurons, and so they are able to really receive light pulses, and depending on a rule set and the state of the thing, they propagate the signal or not, depending how their internal state is. So basically, they receive light pulses and delay them and forward them to the next. And you can imagine it. We see here like a few, and this one is kind of propagating a light pulse to this one, then to this one, and to this one. And there are circles where light pulse is traveling. And you can imagine, like, if you feed in a little pulse, and pulse is kind of traveling in a circle, like a little bit of memory that travels like and changes maybe over the travel, like the game that kids play where you whisper a message in someone's ear and then to the next one, and the message kind of slowly changes. And that's basically what's happening here. Messages that are encoded in light pulses and that are sonified as little clicks, kind of propagating to the system to different connections in the network. So there are little memory loops in the system. There are conjunctions, like if two light pulses feed into one at the exact same time, then the light is propagated, or there's a disjunction. Yeah, if, or there are exclusive auras, there are delay lines, and there are sources that just generate noise patterns and feed them into the system. So this is the basic constraints. This is another iteration where you can see more or less a full network that was in Madrid this year, where kind of the system kind of propagates through the whole space. And the idea is like that people are invited to walk around and walk through the system, and through their presence in the space, they kind of create interferences, kind of block a connection between two neurons, or introduce through a shadow themselves, or incorporate themselves into the system. Sometimes people like introduce new pulses, take the flashlight of the camera. So it has turned, like in the latest iterations, more into like a social place, kind of more like a picnic by the neural network. So people were hanging out there, sitting around like a fireplace or something. That was the last iteration, which was just like 1 month ago in Dubai, where we did a wall version, which is not the best idea, so it should stick to the floor. It was an experiment, and this project also it's based on very simple rules, but it's again like in my practice. So this is a project that started with software simulations. So I built kind of artificial neurons in processing systems, and simulated the propagation, experimented with different angles or with movable heads. I tried what the system, this one was still a version with a movable head, where the direction of the light was changing, like like a sun seeker, like a sun follower. So it was always directing to the most the brightest light source. And that's what I do, like that I build many iterations of these systems and see what kind of behavior I want. And from this information that I gain from the simulations, I developed the neurons that you saw there. I also did a movable head version. This is kind of an endless game of simulating things like this. But what turned out that if I translate these things into a physical space, they behave completely differently. So it seems like that the gap between the simulations and the reality, or the real world, is always enormous. That's something that Experience One All works. And in this case, I had to do a lot of adaptation and reprogramming of the neurons, kind of to achieve like the behavior that I was initially searching. And you see I also tried different setups. We'll try a version that is more spatial, that goes like maybe like a worm through the space. And this was kind of like a first version where you feed in a light pulse, and the light pulse goes around, and the message is stored, and at a certain point decays again. And this is kind of like a balancing act, kind of finding the right parameters and for the system that runs on these little neurons, kind of to have like a really dynamic, adaptive system that also works on different brightness levels. So if you turn on the light, then the system needs a little bit of time to adapt, and then it works again. It's like your eyes will adapt if you go into a dark space, and at a certain point you will see things again. This is a software that I built like to design these networks. So it's kind of like a design grid editor that I use to build prototypes in the studio, and then using this as a plan at the on site to build it up, which sometimes work, but now it's still, so we're getting closer with this editor, but we still have to do a lot of um, adaptation to the space, changing things because some loops might not work. And I show you a brief video that you get an impression also about the sound. The sound kind of represents like a bit going through the system. Yeah, what I didn't say is that I mean, it's impossible to translate that through video. It's kind of like a really on the edge perceptual experience, because the light pulses are quite intense, I would say, but always kind of on a threshold so that you can could get some freedom in the perceptual, in your perceptual system. But you see over time also really drift in intensity, a certain activation of specific parts of the system, and then a slowdown, and then a reactivation, and so on. And to be correct, so it's probably it's not a full or like a clear neural network. It's somehow like a hybrid between a cellular automaton and where all the cells are kind of represented by a simple perceptron element, something. So the neurons have actually like a more complex rule, like just propagating the light. So they have another rule that if there are too many light pulses coming in, they will slow down the propagation on one side. and also they adapt their thresholds to certain formats of intensity. So they always try to get some kind of immediate median of 50% on time in order to keep a specific density of information level, and very few kind of parameters that kind of define the behavior. And as it's like really extremely emergent, the system, it was in the development, like you program, you change another parameter, and then you reprogram all of the neurons. You go to each, or you take them out, programmer, update, and then you put them back in, and then you test it, and then you look for it like a half an hour, and then you update it again, and you change it. And it's kind of like a really, intense developing process. And the idea, I mean, which is also that it's based on this grid system, was kind of the idea of, okay, it's nothing that's set before, so we can develop it for each space, each room where we go. We can build a different organism, something that fits in there, also that makes sense in terms of how data flows in the system. So it has become more, for me, also like more of a site-specific practice, where I don't go like, this is my ready-made container microcosm and put it in the room, but this is kind of bringing a new kind of adaptive microcosm to a specific place, and adapt it to it, and see how it reacts to the space, and so on. Yeah, I think that's it for floating codes. And I can maybe unshare my screen, or do we want to look into the book?
Sure. I actually wanted to ask you if I can share the book with everybody
Sure.
after the talk. Okay, I will do that. Yeah.
Sorry. I'm back here.
Okay. So yeah, thank you so much. This was, of course, as always, really insightful and entertaining. At the same time, I wanted to ask you, I have a lot of questions, but I'll start because I'm curious and I haven't asked you these questions yet. In terms of floating codes, you have created this grid and these grid shapes and so on, but that's essentially your aesthetic input into the project, right? The shapes themselves, of course, they will determine the functioning of the network as you set it up. But have you discovered something if you, for example, would set up the grid in a very, very organized kind of self-healing way or stuff like that? Because there is definitely, it lends itself to this kind of experimentation, actually, since there are a gigantic number of combinations, even in your grid simulator, just looking at it.
Yeah. I was thinking about it, and I did a few tests on that, but this is so intense. So I think the earliest version, where I was putting like all 250 neurons in a 50 square meter room, and then it's like overly activated, so that you don't get any pauses in the system. And then it was like, okay, stretching the system in order. It's also a way of kind of at least trying to grasp what's happening in the system, But there was also, okay, I could also try to, like you explained, to build like a universal system, and that in this really dense grid, certain connections kind of establish self-organized way. But yeah, this still like in my head, like some place for that, to do that in the future. But until now, there was no, and it did not work out. it definitely needs an update of the software. So it needs a new neural software to um, work with shorter pulses or longer pauses. I don't know, but there's a chance.
Are you able to program them all at the same time?
No. So because they're based on like those cheapest microcontroller that you could get, and they don't have Wi-Fi. So they are like really, they don't know nothing
Okay,
about their
yeah, that's
neighbors.
why I'm
Just by
asking.
the
So you have to do each one separately.
yeah. But sometimes we do it like we set it up as this 2 or 3 people, then one person can just like code, but it's not like that. Okay, just change the parameter and update the system and
Yeah. Okay. Oh, very, very fascinating. So I'll leave it to the floor. I'm sure there's a lot of questions from our audience.
sure.
Anybody? Don't be so shy.
I'll jump in just to get things going. So first of all, thank you. It's really wonderful work, and I came across it before knowing about you. I don't remember where, but I remember seeing it in a gallery and thinking, "Hey, this is really interesting." And then looking and finding out that these several of these pieces are actually from one source, and so it's nice to see the big span. One question that I have for maybe for all of us is that we're a media arts and technology department, and we've been around now for 25 years, and we're looking forward to the next 25. And in the first 25, a lot of the work had to do with just confronting the digital. But now the digital is already, it's everywhere. And so there's the question of the physical, the biological, the AI, the neural, the synaptic, all these other things. And of course, if you carry it out, the electronic, the physical computing part, and all the different pieces that go into making this. So the question that might be on the mind of students, is how do you prepare for this? Like, how did you become you in terms of all the bits of knowledge that you're bringing together in order to make these works? There's some technical skill, of course, and there's also artistic awareness, and you showed some pretty, deep historical things. And I'm just interested in the ingredients that you bring, and how you could share that with a group of people like us.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, um, I mean, it really starts from a very deep mm, intrinsic interest in technology since being, I don't know, a kid and getting into computers and knowing as a kid, oh, there's poetry in the machine, and there's something in the machine that I don't understand why it's so fascinating. And I'm learning programming from a very early age on. But then I studied computer science for a while and then dropped out because I don't know, it didn't work for me. And I came across a university, Academy for Media Arts in Cologne. They had open days, and I went there and I saw people doing really interesting things with electronics and technology. And I had long, I was listening to electronic music, and that's how you learn, you understand, oh, there's something in this technologies that's more than just entertainment, that's more than just um, 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 uh, film, or that there's in people use software or programming to do really interesting things. I remember also like um, being into net art and and then I came across art school, and I saw the Academy for Media Arts, and I saw people doing strange things with technology, and I was hooked to it immediately. And I came with a background. I was doing in school electronic engineering, but it was always like I was interested into it, but I didn't know what I want to do with it. And I know that there's something, but I couldn't express it. And at that art school, I found out about it and became interested in media theory and so on. But learning technology is something that I didn't learn too much at art school, even though it had like a distinctive media. It was media arts academy, so there was classes on programming and electronics and music and so on. But I think I learned, and I can speak for my generation, we learned a lot on the internet. So that's the place. So especially when stuff like Arduino and processing came out, and it was it immediately resonated with me how to access these technologies. And honestly, I always need to learn something. So I always need something new to learn, new technologies, and this is kind of also a mode of thinking, like looking into technologies that are not obvious. Yeah, but it's a lot of self-teaching, self-learning, and then kind of bringing it again in a dialogue with a broader question, with theoretical questions, or with thinking about approaches and how to deconstruct technologies and so on. I think, yeah, I don't know if your questions, the question is answered, or
It's an open question, and I don't know that it has a definitive answer. It's more of a flavor. There is one interesting thing that catches my attention. I share with you the idea that poetry and poetics, and the poetry and poetics that are in the machine, are really important and interesting, and that it starts with this deep interest. But in our context, meaning at least in this country, sometimes, and not all the time, sometimes the word poetry or the word poetics brings out resistance from people who think that it doesn't exist anymore or it doesn't matter anymore. And so it's interesting to, I don't agree with that. You know, I think it's important. You know, I think it's really nice to see it demonstrated and spoken to, because it just means making. And what's fascinating about what you do is that you have an idea and you very quickly start making.
that's interesting. Can I respond, because you mentioned the term resistance, and the resistance? Yeah, maybe it's a different form of resistance. Or my headphone just made a click that the battery runs low, but hope it's not that bad. I like the friction also when I interact with technology, that things are not like there immediately. That's something, that I have to work against the technology, maybe a consumer technology, because we are, I don't want to say the word abusing, but we're using technology in a way or I use technology in a way how it was not intended to be used, right? So I'm always like, we also get at an art school, and we're always like with a housekeeping department, and whenever we do things and they come in our laboratories, they're like, oh God, what are you doing? It's not intended to use this technology like this. It's not safe, yeah. And I like to go in the places of technology where it's not safe, where you use things that are not intended to be like this. And the same with technology or with software, it's different, like also if you open a music software, then you have the 4/4 takt, and change it. And the first thing you have to do, don't use it how the tool is kind of intended to be used. And this is kind of, for me, creating kind of a friction between me, or how my students kind of create a friction with themselves and the technology, in order to kind of get something out of it that is out of the thinking, the intended thinking space. I don't know.
Great. That's another favorite word of mine, friction. But I see that Kathy Ray has a question for you. So I'll Kathy, do you
Yeah,
want to jump in and ask?
I think Kathy has left. She had to leave, but the question
Oh,
is
she
still
had to leave?
here.
Yeah, the question
So
is
it's about the people wandering around in the installation, right? That question.
yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's definitely the case. It did not become clear through the documentation because you do document when no one is there, but usually that's the case. So people can walk around, they can cross interfere with the elements. Like there, I had that one photo where people were sitting in the room, and that's basically how the case. That's the case. So people should interact or walk there and without any, and it's like a very, how would you say that? Like, it's not an intended interaction, so they interact without knowing that they interact. Their presence kind of is kind of reflected or kind of mirrored with in the system, or yeah.
Do we have any other questions from our students? Come on. Or is everybody checked out somewhere? Okay, then I have a question. I wanted to ask you actually, because looking at your, let's call it opus, yeah, at your opera, at your set of works and so on, it's pretty clear to someone that follows the media arts context that you work in a very precise and persistent manner, because there is not it's clear that there's a lot of evolution. The works kind of built upon each other. That's how I see them. I mean, maybe there's definitely, I see in your work that evolutionary connection from work to work, actually, and also that they are clearly the result of a very long process. And how long does it, if taking an average, these processes are 2-3 years long, right? As far as I also have talked to you and so on. So I think this is very interesting for, our community, which is, and this world, which wants, dang, new things all the time and so on. And whereas there are some of us who work much slower than others. So if you can talk a little bit about this process, because I think it's beautiful. And actually, when I will share the book with everybody, I think it's also clear from there that there's a lot of study that goes into it. I commend you on your fantastically documented website. It's a rarity these days to see even sources and so on for the works. It's really a great resource actually for anybody who wants to study media art and processes. And on your website you have a lot of very interesting links to actual sources. And I teach a class in MIT 200, which is kind of the history of art and technology. Gordon Pask is always present in that class. And I always kind of point our community to the original sources, not to the interpretations. And behold, Flood, of course, appears in the sources too, right? And you have him too. So that was very nice. But if you can talk a little bit about this process, the processes.
Yeah, they I don't know, 2 years, 3 years, sometimes shorter, but then it's for instance, like this random access memory, that was really quick. But it continues. I mean, also maybe for floating codes, it's not finished yet. It's like the next exhibition, there will always we do an update, we change it to the space, and maybe we do a more denser grid version. And there's always like but the process is. I hope that the process somehow inscribes itself also in the project, right? It's research in a way, and it's sure it's not not about creating explicit knowledge like hopefully science does. So it's different forms of knowledge that I produce that is sometimes for me, sometimes for everyone else, and knowledge that I want to share. And I think Pickering calls it a performative experimentation, and that's somehow also how I frame it. And then sure, there's like this point where a project goes from my studio into to exhibition space, and then something changes. Also, then decisions are made, and it's really like this with these two projects, like with floating codes and a natural history of networks. The experimentation, the process continues. A lot of the others are there in their microcosm and they're finished, even though I worked 2 years on it, but they are somehow finished. And with this new, more open-ended pieces, they adapt and change, and also feedback on me and so on. So I put myself in the loop, yeah. So it was a little bit, the other project a little static in a way, and that's something that I try to yeah, eliminate. And in a way, it's a kind of like the whole philosophy of it. You know, it's a process art basically. It's a process-based art, and it's in the making, in the development, and which kind of leaps over into the exhibition space, and that's kind of the ideal, I don't know, my ideal way of doing that.
Thank you. All right, who has a question for Ralf?
Yes, something in the chat, right? I can read it. Give the intricate complexity and beauty evident in your projects. Do you typically operate with a central idea guiding your work, or do you begin creating, allowing the concept to crystallize during the process? Perhaps a combination of both? I guess it's a combination of both, and sometimes I think this random access memory, like this computer running on stones, that was like, okay, yeah, that's I do that now. I do that now. I have to do that now, and was like, it was almost straightforward. There was a few like turns, but it was quite straightforward. But it's usually both, and yeah, that the idea of crystallization is also, yeah, the concept or the idea of crystallization is probably good metaphor that seems, you know, like at some point, like a seed starts to spread, and then the things become clearer, and yeah, it's yeah. You're welcome.
I have another one, because it's kind of it's one that I actually wanted to ask you some time ago. What about humor in your work? Which is, I always see that there is this element, in my opinion. There is a kind of a wittiness of Ralf Baecker when he deals with networks. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wish there's some humor, but I mean, I'm actually like a humorous person, but I think though some people would say there's no humor in it, but maybe there someone at one point someone will expose that it's all a prank, or I don't know. No, I don't know. I think the humor is I would
I
love
didn't mean prank. I meant more,
Yeah.
higher level equations.
Yeah, yeah, difficult to say. I wish I could. I mean, I really love where people have humor in their art practice, and I don't see that in mine too much. So it's always like very straightforward and thinking, translating, representing, thinking around another corner, translating into another level of material, and doing this. And yeah, but it's good to hear that some people see some humor in it, but
Yeah,
I don't know.
maybe maybe humor. I mean, maybe this is my usage of English. The proper word is probably wit. That's what I meant. So, but let's leave it at there. We'll discuss it in person more.
Okay.
Wady wrote just thank you.
Ah, nice to hear. Yeah, it was a really great version at the new media gallery in Vancouver. That was really fantastic some iteration of the installation. Very happy.
Do you have any other last questions for Ralf, since it's pretty late and he has to sleep too? But if there's nothing pressing, I would like to thank everybody, and especially, of course, Ralf, for giving us your time today. And really looking forward to, finally now, after this COVID pause is over and things are, starting to get into motion again, so that you would also visit us in person when you are in California in 2024. So we'll make sure that happens.
Yeah, that would be perfect. I would be super happy to visit you.
Oh, there's
It
another
looks like
question.
there's a question.
There's another question. So let's go with that last question, since it's quite kind of beautiful and open-ended. Do you see it?
Yeah. Yeah, I see it. How do you choose a balance between the complexity of the system with the visual representation you want to achieve? That's kind of it's a really good question. And there's something that jumps in that's kind of intuition, I would say. It's kind of like a negotiation process between what is technical possible, what is the thing that I want to show, what is and I do a lot of experimentation on that. So it's I build prototypes and then see, is it dense enough, like the network or the movements, the behavior, and then there's a lot of fine tuning, but it's really driven by a very hands-on experimentation process. And also I showed you a few of these simulations that I did for floating codes, and I do them for all work, so that I build like a little processing sketch to see how dense it is and how to have shift different layers of it to create a certain density, and often show that there are a lot of constraints, like the physical constraints, the technological constraints, and my limited tech. Yeah, it's not that limited, but somehow what tools can I work with? What is my tool set, and what what is my material language, the materials that I use? So there's a certain limitation that I also use in order to to distill kind of this relationship between this the complexity and what the system might represent. But it's kind of like a puzzle game, like a chess game where you and you move things around. It's kind of very sculpturing. I feel like it's very sculpturing process in a way.
Thank you. That was a good last question.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alejandro. So, okay, good. Everybody, the seminar continues next week. We have another really interesting guest. And but Ralf, thanks so much. And don't be a stranger. I will share the book with the community after the talk, so they can actually download it and so on and continue studying, because there's a lot in there. Actually, all the works are explained and so on, and there's some nice articles.
Yeah, I can also send you a physical copy, like one or two, maybe for your library or something you want to share.
Sure, yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
All right, take care.
Have a nice
Bye,
day.
everybody.
Bye.